They told her her daughter would be gone by Friday. Not moved, not hired out, gone. Sold south, to the sugar fields. And on a plantation like Caldwell's, everyone knew what that meant. It meant heat that never let up, work that never stopped. It meant children disappearing into cane fields so thick, they might as well be graves. Margaret Hayes heard the news in the cotton rows. July, 1858, Louisiana. The sun pressed down hard enough to make breathing feel like work. Her hands were already split open beneath strips of cloth. Her back still burned from the overseer's whip earlier that morning. But none of that dropped her to her knees. A whisper did. A house girl leaned close, voice shaking. Master Caldwell's selling Sarah. By week's end. That was it. No warning, no mercy. Just a sentence that ended everything. Margaret didn't scream. She had learned long ago, men like Caldwell enjoyed that. She didn't beg, didn't collapse. Not outwardly. But inside, something finally gave. Her knees hit the dirt, cotton leaves scratching her arms, dry soil pressing into her skin. Around her, the field kept moving, hands picking, baskets dragging. Nobody stopped, nobody could. Because even grief had a quota. She thought of her daughter, Sarah, 8 years old, small, always singing when she thought no one was listening. Always bringing back little flowers, like the world still held something gentle. Margaret closed her eyes, because she knew what the sugar fields were. Everyone did. People didn't survive there. Children didn't last at all. Then, she thought of one person. Samuel, her brother. The only man on that plantation who didn't belong to fear. Samuel had never seen a single thing in his life. Born blind, never once complained. But somehow, he always knew. He knew who was walking by the sound of their step. Knew when rain was coming before the sky changed. Knew when a man was lying, before the words finished leaving his mouth. People whispered about him. The enslaved called him careful. The white men called him useful. But Caldwell called him dangerous. Them never out loud. Samuel was nearly 7 feet tall, broad, immovable, strong enough to do the work of 2 men without ever raising his voice. But that wasn't what unsettled people. It was the way he moved. Like he wasn't guessing. Like he understood things no one had explained to him. Margaret had known that all her life. She had raised him. After their mother died, bringing him into the world. She remembered him as a baby, too quiet, too still, growing too fast. By 10, he worked like a grown man. By 15, even overseers thought twice around him. Not because he fought back. He never did. But because something about him felt unbreakable. And Caldwell hated that. Hated anything he couldn't fully control. Anything that didn't bend when he pushed. That's why this wasn't just about money. Margaret knew it. Selling Sarah wasn't just to cover debts. It was to remind everyone who held power. And to hurt the one man he had never been able to break. That night, after the fields went quiet, Margaret went to find Samuel. The heat still clung to the air, heavy, wet. Smoke drifted low across the cabins. Crickets filled the dark. Samuel sat outside his cabin, still, waiting. Before she even spoke, he said her name, Margaret. And just like that, she knew. He already understood. They're taking my baby. Her voice came out flat, empty, selling her south. Samuel didn't move, didn't react, just breathed once, slow, controlled. I know. Margaret sat beside him, her hands shaking now. She won't survive. You know she won't. Silence. Then, he turned slightly toward her. What do you want me to do? The question hit harder than anything else, because she knew the answer. For one moment, she wanted him to destroy everything, to walk into the big house and end it. But she also knew what would follow. How many would die for that choice? So she swallowed, hard, and said the only thing that mattered. I want my child safe. Samuel nodded, slow, certain, like he had already been thinking, already planning. Then he said, quietly, then listen carefully. Margaret turned toward him, heart racing, because something in his voice had changed. Not anger, not fear. Something colder, something certain. Caldwell thinks power comes from fear, Samuel said. He's wrong. And in that moment, Margaret realized something. Her brother wasn't afraid. Not of Caldwell, not of the whip, not even of what might happen next. And that was far more dangerous than anything on that plantation. Margaret didn't understand. But she listened. Because Samuel had never spoken like that before. Not calm, not quiet. Controlled, like he already knew how this would end. What do you mean? She asked. Her voice smaller now, uncertain. Samuel didn't answer right away. He tilted his head slightly, as if listening to something far beyond the night around them. Then he spoke. Caldwell doesn't care about money. He cares about how he looks. Margaret frowned. That don't change anything. He's still selling her. No, Samuel said. He thinks he is. Silence. The words didn't make sense yet, but something in them felt real. He owes money, Samuel continued. To men in Natchez. He loses at cards. Then he reminds himself he's still in control. Margaret swallowed. You're saying this is about pride. I'm saying everything he does is about pride. Samuel turned his face slightly toward her. And pride makes men predictable. That word lingered. Predictable. Like Caldwell wasn't a master, not really. Just a man. But how does that help us? Margaret asked. They'll take her in the morning. Samuel exhaled slowly. They will try. Something in his tone made her chest tighten. What are you going to do? She whispered. Samuel leaned forward slightly. His hands resting on his knees, still. I've been listening, he said. To everything. The house, the yard, the men. What they say when they think nobody hears. Margaret stared at him. Because she knew that was true. Samuel heard things others missed, always had. He's expecting visitors, Samuel continued. Planters, men like him. Saturday. Margaret blinked. What does that matter? It matters, Samuel said quietly, because he wants to impress them. He needs to. Now she was starting to see it, just a little. You're going to, what? Embarrass him? No. Samuel's voice dropped lower. Something worse. Margaret felt a chill, despite the heat. What's worse than that? Make him doubt himself. Silence settled again. Because that was not something slaves did. Not something they were supposed to be able to do. Margaret shook her head slightly. That's not enough. He'll still sell her. Samuel turned toward her fully now. And though he couldn't see, it felt like he was looking straight at her. Not if selling her becomes a risk. Those words landed differently. Heavier. More dangerous. Margaret's voice dropped. What kind of risk? Samuel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood. Slowly. At his full height, he seemed even larger in the dark. Like something carved out of shadow. The kind a man like Caldwell fears most. Losing control. Margaret's breath caught. Because now, she understood just enough to be afraid. If you push him too far, she said quietly, he'll kill you. Samuel nodded once. I know. No hesitation. No doubt. Just fact. That scared her more than anything else, because it meant he had already accepted the cost. You can't do this, she said, her voice breaking now. I already lost one thing. I'm not losing you too. Samuel reached out, finding her hand in the dark, his grip gentle, steady. You're not losing anyone. She wanted to believe that, but belief had never kept anyone alive here. Just one more day, Samuel said. Whatever happens tomorrow, you stay calm. You don't fight. You don't beg. You let me handle it. Margaret shook her head again. Slow, helpless. I don't understand what you're planning. Samuel gave the smallest hint of a smile. You don't need to. That answer didn't comfort her. It never had. But it had always been true. Far off, the dog barked near the big house. Somewhere, the door slammed. The plantation shifted in its sleep. And Margaret realized something. This wasn't just about Sarah anymore. This was something bigger. Something that had been building. For years. Samuel, she whispered. What are you really going to do? He didn't answer. Not directly. Instead, he turned his face toward the distant big house. Toward the place where Thornton Caldwell slept, thinking he controlled everything. And Samuel spoke, soft enough that only she could hear. I'm going to remind him what fear feels like. And in that moment, Margaret understood something she had never allowed herself to believe. Her brother wasn't just surviving this world. He was studying it. And tomorrow, he was going to change it. Morning came too fast. It always did. The bell rang before sunrise, dragging everyone back into the same life they couldn't escape. Margaret barely slept. She lay awake beside Sarah, counting breaths, holding her just a little tighter each time the child stirred. Because this could be the last morning. The last time she woke up with her daughter still beside her. Outside, the plantation was already moving. Footsteps in the dirt. Chains shifting. Voices low and careful. Nobody said it out loud, but everyone knew what day it was. The trader would come. And when he did, Sarah would be gone. Margaret dressed slowly, her hands shaking as she tied the cloth around them. Sarah watched her, quiet. Children always knew when something was wrong. Mama, she whispered. Margaret forced a smile. It's all right. But the words felt empty, because for once, she didn't know if it was a lie. Across the yard, Samuel was already working. Standing near the barn. Splitting wood. The axe rose and fell. Steady. Measured. Too steady. Margaret watched him from a distance. Because something about him felt different. Not tense. Not angry. Focused. Like everything happening today, was already part of something he had decided. Then, the big house door opened, and Thornton Caldwell stepped out. He looked exactly like he always did. Clean, controlled, dressed better than the heat allowed. A riding crop in his hand, just because he liked the way people reacted to it. He stood on the porch, surveying the land, watching people move, watching ownership in motion. Satisfied. At least, that's how it looked. But Samuel had been right about one thing. Caldwell cared about appearances. And this morning, something about the air wasn't right. The field was quieter. Too quiet. Even the overseers seemed sharper, watching more closely. Caldwell noticed. Of course he did. Men like him noticed everything, when it threatened control. His gaze shifted across the yard, until it landed on Samuel. The axe rose, fell, rose again. Perfect rhythm. Caldwell frowned. There was something about it, something he couldn't quite name. Too precise. Too certain. He stepped off the porch, boots crunching against dry ground, walking toward the barn. Samuel didn't stop. Not at first. He kept working, until Caldwell was close enough. Then, he lowered the axe. And turned. Not directly at Caldwell, slightly past him, like always, but somehow, it still felt like eye contact. "You're Samuel," Caldwell said. He already knew. This wasn't a question. "Yes, master." Calm, respectful, controlled. Caldwell circled him slowly, studying, measuring, the size, the strength, and something else, something he didn't like. "They say you're the strongest man on this plantation." Samuel didn't react. "I just do my work." Caldwell smirked slightly. "Can't see a thing, can you?" "No, master." "That must be difficult, living in darkness, never knowing what's right in front of you. A test, a push, looking for weakness." Samuel didn't take it, didn't rise, didn't fall, just stood there. And that bothered Caldwell more than anything. "I'm selling your sister's child," Caldwell said suddenly, watching closely. "Traders coming this morning." Silence. A long one. Just enough to matter. Then, Samuel spoke. "She's your property, master. Not my place to question your decisions." Perfect answer. Exactly what Caldwell expected. Exactly what he wanted. But something about it felt wrong. Too clean, too easy. Caldwell narrowed his eyes. Because men like him trusted fear, and this didn't feel like fear. It felt like something else. Something controlled. "Good," Caldwell said. But his voice had shifted slightly, less certain. "Because if there's any trouble, I sell her mother too. And you." Still, Samuel didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't even tighten his jaw. "Understood," he said. Quiet, flat. And that's when Caldwell felt it. Just for a second, a flicker. Not defiance, not rebellion. Something worse. Control, but not his. Caldwell stepped back slightly. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough. "You'll be working tomorrow," Caldwell added. "Got guests coming. I want you to show them what you can do." A command, but also an invitation. Exactly what Samuel needed. "Yes, master." No hesitation. Caldwell nodded once, then turned, walking back toward the house, trying to shake the feeling. But it stayed with him, like something unseen, just slightly out of place. Behind him, Samuel picked up the axe again and brought it down once, twice. Same rhythm, same control. But now, there was something else in it. Not work, not routine. Preparation. And across the yard, Margaret realized something. Samuel hadn't tried to stop the sale. Not yet. He was letting it happen. Letting Caldwell feel in control. Letting him believe nothing had changed. And that was the most dangerous part. Because whatever Samuel was planning, it hadn't started yet. But it was about to. The trader arrived just after sunrise. Right on time. Men like him always were. Joseph Ricks. Thin, sharp. The kind of man who had learned to look at people and only see numbers. His horse stopped in front of the big house, dust settling slowly around him. Caldwell came out smiling. Like this was business, nothing more. They shook hands, spoke quietly, as if they were discussing crops. Across the yard, Margaret stood frozen. Sarah clung to her dress, small fingers gripping tight. She didn't understand everything, but she understood enough. "Mama," she whispered. Margaret couldn't answer, because if she spoke, she might break. Other enslaved people gathered at a distance, watching, not interfering. They couldn't. They had seen this before, too many times. And near the barn, Samuel stood, still, listening, not moving, not reacting, just waiting. That was the strangest part. Margaret kept looking at him, waiting for something. But nothing came. Not yet. Caldwell and Ricks stepped back outside. Conversation finished. Decision made. "Bring the girl," Caldwell called. Just like that. Final. Margaret's body refused to move. Her legs locked. Her breath caught. Someone behind her tried to help, to guide her forward. But it only made it worse. Because this was the moment. The one you never came back from. And then, Samuel spoke. "Master Caldwell." Everything stopped. Even the air. Because slaves didn't interrupt. Caldwell turned slowly. Anger already rising. "What is it?" he snapped. Samuel took a step forward. Then another. Measured. Controlled. "Begging your pardon, master," he said. "But I wanted to remind you about your guests tomorrow." Caldwell frowned. The shift was immediate. From anger to attention. "What about it?" he asked. Samuel nodded slightly. "I've been preparing. For the demonstration." A pause. Just long enough to hook him. "I thought maybe it would be better to do it today, while Mr. Ricks is here." Now Caldwell hesitated. Just a little. And that was enough. Because Samuel had shifted the moment. From loss to performance. Ricks leaned forward slightly. Curious. "I've heard about him," he said. "Wouldn't mind seeing it." That did it. Caldwell's pride took over, just like Samuel knew it would. He glanced once at Margaret, then back at Samuel. Then made his decision. "Fine," Caldwell said. "Let's see it." And just like that, the sale stopped. Not canceled. Delayed. But delayed was enough. For now. The yard shifted, people moving, watching, waiting. Samuel walked toward the stacked fence posts near the barn, his hands brushing over them, choosing. To everyone else, it looked like a show, a display of strength. But Margaret saw something different. Precision. Intention. Samuel lifted the first post. Heavy, solid. He raised it slowly, holding it in the air. Effortless. The white men smiled, impressed, because they thought this proved something, that they owned power. But Samuel wasn't finished. He set the post down carefully, then moved to the next, and the next, placing them, arranging them, building something. Caldwell watched closely now, because this wasn't how it was supposed to go. This wasn't just lifting. "What are you doing?" he asked. Samuel didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned slightly toward him. "For the final part," Samuel said quietly, "I want you to choose." Caldwell blinked. "What?" "Choose one," Samuel said. "Any of them. So you know it's real." Now the yard was silent again. Because something had changed. Something subtle, but real. Caldwell pointed. "That one. The thickest post." Samuel nodded, walked to it slowly, placed both hands on the wood. And then he stopped. Not moving, not speaking. Just standing there. The silence stretched. Too long. Too deliberate. Until finally, Samuel spoke. "Before I do this, I want to ask you something." Caldwell's expression tightened. He didn't like this. Didn't like where it was going. But everyone was watching. So he nodded. "Go on." Samuel's grip tightened slightly on the post. "What makes a man powerful?" The question landed strangely. Out of place. Wrong. Caldwell frowned. "What kind of question is that?" Samuel didn't move. Didn't explain. Just waited. Just waited. And for the first time, Caldwell hesitated. Because suddenly, this didn't feel like a demonstration anymore. It felt like something else. Something he didn't control. And that was exactly where Samuel wanted him. The yard went completely still. No wind, no movement. Just that question hanging in the air. What makes a man powerful? Caldwell didn't answer right away, because something about it felt wrong. Too direct. Too exposed. "Strength," he said finally. "Control. Ownership." The words sounded confident, but something underneath them wasn't. Samuel nodded slowly, as if confirming something. Not learning. Confirming. "That's what you believe," he said. "Because that's what you need to believe." A shift. Small, but real. Caldwell's jaw tightened. "You're forgetting your place." "No," Samuel said quietly. "I know exactly where I stand." And somehow, that made it worse. Because he didn't sound defiant. He sounded certain. Samuel lifted the post. One smooth motion, effortless. Held it there, in the air, like it weighed nothing. The white men watched. Impressed, but also uneasy, because something had changed. And they could feel it, even if they didn't understand it. Samuel lowered the post slightly, then spoke again. You think power comes from fear, but fear doesn't last. You think it comes from control, but control only works until it doesn't. And ownership. He tightened his grip. The wood creaked. That's just a story men tell themselves. Before anyone could react, he brought the post down across his knee. The crack echoed like a gunshot. Clean, violent, final. The wood split in two. But Samuel didn't stop. He snapped the halves again. And again. Until what had been solid oak was nothing but broken pieces at his feet. Silence. No one spoke. No one moved. Because it wasn't the strength. It wasn't the breaking. It was everything around it. The way he stood. The way he spoke. The way he didn't ask permission. For the first time, Caldwell didn't look like the most powerful man in his own yard. He looked uncertain. And that was something no one had ever seen before. Samuel let the broken wood fall, then faced slightly toward Caldwell. You can sell the girl, he said quietly. You can sell her mother. You can sell me. That's your right. The words were calm. Respectful. Respectful. But something inside them wasn't. But understand this. Everyone here is watching. And if you do it, they'll remember. Not fear. Not obedience. They'll remember this. Another silence. Longer. Heavier. Because now, Caldwell understood. This wasn't a threat. Not exactly. It was worse. It was truth. And truth could spread. Caldwell looked around the yard. At the faces. At the stillness. At something he had never allowed before. Unity. And for the first time, he hesitated. Joseph Ricks shifted beside him. Uncomfortable now. About the girl, he said. Caldwell didn't answer. Didn't move. Just stood there, thinking. Because suddenly, this wasn't about $650 anymore. It was about control. And whether he still had it. Finally, he exhaled. Sharp. Annoyed. The sail's off. The words came fast. Like he wanted them out, before he could change his mind. Ricks frowned. You're serious? I said it's off. And just like that, it was done. Margaret couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Because she had heard those words before, in dreams. But never like this. Never real. Sarah looked up at her. Confused. Mama? Margaret dropped to her knees, pulling her close. Holding her tight. She might disappear if she didn't. Across the yard, Samuel stood exactly where he was. No smile. No celebration. Just stillness. Because he understood something, no one else did. Nothing had really changed. Not the system, not the chains. Not the world they lived in. But something small, something dangerous, had shifted. For the first time, Caldwell had stepped back. And for the first time, everyone had seen it happen. That night, when the plantation went quiet again, Margaret sat beside Samuel, Sarah asleep against her shoulder. "You saved her," she whispered. Samuel shook his head slightly. "No." I reminded him. Fear works both ways. Silence settled between them, soft, different now. And somewhere in the dark, beyond the fields, beyond the houses, the world kept turning. Unchanged, but not untouched. Because sometimes, the smallest shift in power is where everything begins.